Hi there, it's Paulie here with some cool transgender history. So this one is set in the period of high glamour in France, particularly Paris, in the mid-19th century. La Belle Époque, the Second Empire. For those not up on it, we had Napoleon Bonaparte's mighty empire, which went crash, and rightly so. We got the big stick out and out of the cupboard and had to whack 'em for 6. But a second empire period began when another Napoleon took the throne, and this regime was one that installed this entire era of glitter and glam. So this was the era of opera. This was the era of ballrooms, of mass parties, of champagne dues, of gentlemen in silk coats and top hats, of women in hoop skirts, fluffing fans. This is it, that whole 1850s, 60s, 70s period. Now, through this was this really interesting individual. She left a autobiography to us. She went under the name of La Comtesse, the Countess. Her adoptive female name was Pauline. She was originally born Arthur Berger. So she was born into a lower to lower middle class family. Her father was a coachman for the nobility, and from a very, very early age she just wanted to be female. Wore girls' clothes. At this era, all children wore skirts, and they wore skirts usually until they were breeched, somewhere about 7. But this individual did not. She stayed with her skirts. As an adolescent, she had affairs with older men, and she eventually moved to Paris. And there she became the mistress of a member of the nobility, son of a marquis. And so she became not just the, she wasn't a secret mistress. She's the one that's on this chap's arm as they go to the opera, as they go to the balls, as they go to the functions. She is mingling with nobility as a transgender woman. She had some fame as a courtesan. Excuse me, what was the wonderful term they used? Dame mondaine, which is someone who, is sort of on the cusp of being completely unacceptable to society. This is where this is a word for sort of the courtesans, the outre artists, this sort of thing. She was in that society, and therefore, what's the beautiful British term? Much caressed. Someone worth having around at your social functions. That lover did leave her after a few years, but by this stage she was quite well established. So she then managed to establish a career for herself as a singer, as a cabaret performer, as a stage performer, and as a fairly high-class courtesan. You would pay her for sex work. You would also just pay her to accompany you to parties. She was apparently beautiful. She was apparently witty. She was well sought after, well loved. Wackily, because she's still on birth certificate as male, she gets drafted into the army. So she has a forced detransition, and in her autobiography she writes about just the misery and pain that this caused. And she has absolutely no wish to live this way. So she goes AWOL, and in going AWOL, it seems that she thieved food and clothes in order to try and get the hell out of Dodge. She got caught and she got sentenced to prison. She got sentenced to prison for 10 years. She's actually not specific, but it sounds to me like she did not spend 10 years in prison. But she did go to prison, and of course there's a male prison where she continues to be forcibly detransitioned. And again, writes about the pain that this caused her. In prison, she meets a man, Gustave Doré, who she describes as the love of her life, and he continues to be present in her life after, although the relationship isn't described in much detail, but it is described as the long-going passion of both their lives. One happy thing. However, she got out and she was straight back into society. Now, there was actually a society of queer folk very active in Paris at the time. And in many ways, they were a sort of a glitterati, because these people found a lot of their life on the stage in cabaret and cafe culture. They were performers. Some of them were sex workers. Some of them were not. Some of them were rich. Some of them weren't. However, they did have a very glittering life. She describes them essentially broken into very distinct sub-communities within a very tight general community. Those are the lesbians, what do they call them? I think they're tribauds. So there are lesbian women. There is a subset in there of transgender men. That is women who dress and live the lives of men. And she's extremely fond of these and says how beautiful they are, how kind they are. She describes some of these dress in men's clothes only when meeting at their actual meeting places. Some live full time. She says some of them essentially do not pass because of what she describes as their beautiful curves. But others, she describes one in particular, who is just described as B, was so handsome and wore the part so well and played the masculine role so well that there were women all across Paris just swooning for this person. And indeed they had lovers. So that's it for the lesbian and trans men community. There was also the gay male community, that is people who lived as men and were attracted to men. And within that there were the filles d'or, the golden women, who are transgender women. They were people who had been assigned male at birth, but who lived as women. Again, some of them could only do it within the realms of their meeting places, but there was a very hardcore community who were full-time transgender women. The lesbians in particular were extremely kind to the transgender women and looked after them. You will find this all through history in every single queer community, by the way. It is definitely a thread. Transgender women and the lesbian community have always been like that. They help show transgender women the ropes, as it were, because they knew something of makeup and dress and so on. Were happy to share, in many ways, share the thing that they were in some cases casting off. Though there were some of the lesbian community were a subset that were les beaux tribauds. They were beautifully turned out and celebrating the finery, where others were less committed to femme appearance. So, a really interesting and active community. Her autobiography describes champagne parties amongst these people. It was a social set. Many of them were quite famous on stage. Many of them were, quite famous as lovers and mistresses of important folk. They lived well and they enjoyed life. She found her name, La Comtesse, by this group. She describes a very moving ceremony in which the name was conferred on her. The group would confer names upon transgender women because they knew that they had to cast their old names aside. But her name, it was to be the Countess. They decided. And she was extremely moved by the ceremony. And so she put out this autobiography, which was the Secret Confessions of a Parisienne, the life of the La Comtesse, 1850 to 1871. And it covers her life. This was published in 1895. And so we don't actually know exactly when she was born or when she died. Ooh, maybe she didn't, since there's also a high vampire period. But she left a record. She was quite a good amateur artist. She left sketches of some of her fellow transgender women, some of the lesbian and transgender men community that she was socializing with, and they're rather good, and they're very interesting portraits of people living comfortably in their identities in Parisian society. Not hidden from Parisian society, in Parisian society. Her autobiography, I have to say, it is full of some of the tropes of the age, because she is sort of laughing a bit, because you'll find a lot of these autobiographies are, why was I cursed with this abnormality? Her, not so much, but hers are way more, why was I accursed with this ability to attract men? Oh, alas! Why was I so cursed with a talent for pleasure? So, confession, not confession. I absolutely adore it. Her life was interesting. She came out to her mother at an early age, and was immediately treasured as a daughter. She lived this public life as a woman. Many historians, older historians of course, have always referred to this poor woman using he, him pronouns, because, they were 19th century, 20th century bastards. But she lived as a woman, and she lived well. She lived a colourful life. She was visible, and she lived well, and she looked after the incoming generations of people. La Comtesse, Pauline, came out to her mother at a fairly early age and was immediately treasured as a daughter. She was a celebrated individual, both within the queer community but also within the stage community and social set of the time. Probably the best words are her final words from her autobiography, where she says, "I, who so desired to be a girl, managed to triumph over nature," which is rather beautiful. Anyway, that's some 19th century fun for us all. Take care of yourselves out there. Over here in Australia, we're fighting the good fight. I'm seeing a lot more politicians and so forth face to face to deal with some legislation issues in other states and so on, and we're winning this. Never let despair overtake you. Remember La Comtesse's joy, and remember, we have always been here, and we always will. We ain't going anywhere, baby, and we're going to be visible AF. Take care.